the reason why it's so crack sensitive or lacks toughness, you could also say, is the exact reason why it's so abrasion resistant, which is that those carbides, because they have such a high hardness on a micro scale, they have no ductility, nothing, right? So it's really easy to brittle fracture them. But at the same time, it's also really hard to get something else that's hard through it. That it lacks true tensile strength. So if you actually pull it in tension, it doesn't have a lot to hold together. It does not do great in compression. It can handle it. It does terrible against uneven loading. If there's parts of the casting that are getting more loading than other parts, no, it's not going to happen. It has essentially no impact toughness. I think some people have actually hit Sharpie bars out of white iron, and I think the toughness was something like 3 joules. It was basically non-existent, right? Other thing I would add is it's very sensitive to heat, too. Thermal gradients in the part can very easily cause these things to rupture, these castings. So I've seen it happen before. Guys have knocked castings off of their grinding tables, and they've busted. I've seen guys go in with the fork truck during shakeout. They pick the casting up by accident, and I've seen them break them when they fall from the fork truck. I've seen them be hit by the fork truck and break, just the forks going into it. It is very crack sensitive, especially after shakeout. I've seen it so many times where somebody will go to install a white iron casting, and a lot of times these wear liners and stuff, they have a couple bolt holes, or they have 3 or 4 or something like that. I've seen it so many times, they either aren't using a torque wrench and they don't have their torque wrench, or they don't have their torque wrench set right, or they just tighten one bolt down all the way before tightening the other ones. It's kind of like tightening a tire. If you do that, these castings quite literally can break in half. So quenching and tempering is another option for white iron, and one of the reasons why people like to quench and temper white iron is it typically turns the austenite that's in the matrix alongside the cementite and the carbides into martensite. And what that does is it makes the general matrix harder than as opposed to when it's just austenite. Stress relief gives you a little bit more forgiveness in that regard, in that if you do that, the chances of it breaking on you they're non-zero, right? But they're less likely. And so when it comes to actually pouring the material, it is pretty easy. It's not like gray or ductile iron where you have to have a mag treatment or you have to have inoculation or both, right? When it comes to shakeout is where it gets hairy, because like we said, right, it's hyper crack sensitive. So pretty much anything you do that induces impact into the part, so much as throwing it into a bin, you can crack the part and ruin your day. On top of that, you essentially can't weld it. Because of how high the hardness is and the microstructural constituents that are there, you have to preheat the castings to a temperature that's ungodly to try and actually weld them without inducing stresses that are going to cause cracks later. So you essentially can't weld them, right? And then when it comes to heat treatment, you have to be really careful with heat treatment too, because if you ramp too fast, again, it has low thermal conductivity, doesn't like thermal gradients, so it can easily crack during ramping during heat treat, or even during cooling during heat treat also.